Bills Mafia. On today's Air Raid Hour pregame, we'll be breaking down what we expect to see from the Bills tomorrow afternoon versus the Pittsburgh Steelers in the wild card round, plus previewing key matchups and handing out our pregame superlatives. But first,
welcome to the Air Raid Hour, a Cover One Network podcast. Here are your hosts, Judge Mathis and Tilt Money.
welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to the Air Raid Hour Buffalo Bills pregame show presented by the Cover One Sports Network and Picasso's Pizza. My name is Steve Mathis. You can follow me on Twitter at the Bills Guys. Joined as always by my co-host Dave Tilton. You can find him on Twitter at Tilt Money. And Dave, I'll tell you what, we were originally planning this show to be a preview of the Bills Steelers game Sunday at 1 p.m., but the game has been moved due to a, blizzard hitting the city of Buffalo to 4:30 p.m. tomorrow. And I'll tell you what, Dave, yesterday was it was just so miserable and so toxic on the internet yesterday, with all of the people who want to reveal themselves for being as uneducated as they are, with some of the things that were thrown around about why this game was moved and the things that they were saying about the team, the Buffalo Bills team and the city of Buffalo yesterday. The word soft was thrown around a lot, and I had to walk away from my phone because it was pretty triggering.
Yeah, I mean, look, this is surface level type response, right? That you get from a massive amount of people who don't really know the actual situation. Now, obviously, we and like the followers of Cover One and really a lot of the Bills fans that kind of know what's going on, whether they're in Buffalo or not, like have a pretty good understanding of what the situation is, why this game's being moved. People who see things on the surface about the weather. And by the way, it doesn't help when someone like Mike Tirico on the broadcast last night talks about the game being moved because of the weather and doesn't go into any further detail than that. Then you get people that
Syracuse guys should know too.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why it was unfortunate that a guy like Mike Tirico says that, because he should know, right? And then if a guy like that says something, it gets parroted across all the social media. And I agree with Pete here. The most sensible people are often the quietest. They're not going to really spout off about this. They understand what's going on. And it's just unfortunate that like what social media turns into is just like Bills fans and people in Buffalo sort of defending the situation, because the fact of the matter is this is really more of a travel issue than it is a playing condition issue. And people can't seem to grasp that.
Yeah, I mean, a number of things. Number one, the Buffalo airport was shut down yesterday, so the Pittsburgh Steelers couldn't have flown in at the time they wanted to fly in. So you kind of need an opponent in order to play a football game. That's number one. Number two, a lot of people are really like, oh, you can't play in snow. You can't play in this. The Buffalo Bills should have built a dome. How stupid are they? This has nothing to do with the surface level conditions on the football field. It has to do with the fact that last year, a very similar blizzard in Buffalo cost 47 people their lives. And a lot of those lives were due to delayed EMT and first responder response time. So if you're Kathy Hochul, the New York City governor, or you're Mark Poloncarz, county executive, you're saying to yourself, hey, 70,000 people converging upon this stadium is going to take away police officers. It's going to take first responders. It's going to cause accidents. It's going to cause delays. People are going to be stuck in their cars. You could have casualties because of this football game. So let's move it outside of this blizzard window once this blizzard goes away. There are Pittsburgh Steelers fans in downtown Buffalo who are yelling and screaming, oh, there's no snow here. What a bunch of babies. The very next morning, there is a bunch of snow there, and there's a difference between the city of Buffalo and Orchard Park. And then you have these dumbass Miami fans who they had enough to worry about last night, and they clearly weren't prepared. for that game in Arrowhead, and their fans were chirping in all afternoon. Well, if Buffalo's infrastructure can't handle a little bit of snow, maybe they should move the football team. Well, maybe they should move the Miami Dolphins because they have postponed or moved multiple football games over the year due to hurricane warnings. You guys aren't prepared for hurricanes and you expect us to be prepared for blizzards. I was just like, I shouldn't have played into these stupid people's hands yesterday. I shouldn't have. And I was just triggered all day, responding to people I shouldn't have been wasting my time responding to.
Yeah, and I mean, I think it's hard, right? Because there's a natural instinct to want to defend the team, defend the region, defend the city, right? And especially when it comes to people who not only are just like uneducated about the situation, but then like try to compare like their region or their team to the bit. Like it just, and as Paige says in the comments, just ignore the idiots. It's not worth your time. And that's what I did ultimately because I knew like
You're a better man than me.
There's no benefit to it, right? And it's just like it takes a lot, right? I get it. It is really hard sometimes to push it way down and not respond. But I have found that like doing that, coming back like hours later, it feels a lot better. So yeah, it is hard in the moment, especially when you get so many uneducated people making comments about it. It is tough.
And you know what did make me feel a heck of a lot better was Sunday night turning on the old Peacock app and watching the Miami Dolphins lose in absolutely embarrassing fashion to the Kansas City Chiefs 26-7. Miami Dolphins fans learning last night that their team was built to win against bad teams in the regular season, but not good teams in the regular season or the playoffs. A lot of questions for the Miami Dolphins now about whether what they have built, what they have created, is a model for sustained success in the National Football League, because anytime they meet any kind of adversity, they can't step up to the challenge. And that was fun to watch them get absolutely curb stomped, unable to handle the conditions, a quarterback who needs everything perfect around him to be good. That was fun to watch as a Bills fan last night.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately you can have a rooting interest, right? And say like maybe if Miami had won and if the Bills win, then the Bills end up hosting Houston, right? As opposed to hosting the Chiefs if they win. And like I don't want to play
Houston right now.
I somewhat agree, but I'd still rather play Houston than the Chiefs. I mean, that's just personal preference. Either way, right?
Yeah.
Watching that game last night, it was especially starting and ending with Mike McDaniel and Tua, right? I mean, Tua, the Chiefs all night taking away his first option. The guy had no clue what to do after his first read was gone, holding on to the ball. He got sacked a couple times, who had been good at avoiding sacks all year. And just like the ball coming out of his hand had no zip on it whatsoever. And so the touchdown he threw to Tyreek was a severely underthrown ball that Tyreek came back on and made a play on. It wasn't a great throw. So Tua looked like he was absolutely lost last night. Mike McDaniel looked like he couldn't have enough layers on in calling that game. And it's just like, I don't know, like for me, I've never been a lot of people like Mike McDaniel and the way he kind of like responds to questions or his general vibe or attitude. It's always kind of rubbed me a little bit the wrong way. I've never really liked it that much, but
watching some of his rants on Hard Knocks too, like the players don't really look all that engaged. Like people outside are like, yeah, I love this message. But then the players don't really look like they're all that into it as he's speaking though. So it's weird.
It seems to me like it's like a little kid trying to talk to adults. I don't know. It feels
it kind of does.
That's the Hard Knocks speeches, right? That you see. That's what it feels like to me.
That motivational speaker that like your company makes you listen to, but you're really not all that motivated by them. Like that's the vibe sometimes you get. But Charles G comes in and says, no love for the Finns, but they were killed by injuries down the stretch. Kansas City is a very good defense. I agree with that, but most of Miami's injuries were fully concentrated on the defensive side of the ball. They were out their top 3 edge rushers. They were out Xavier Howard. All
their
that
defense
stuff
did okay. I mean, their defense did okay.
The only legitimate injury to their offense was Connor Williams, their starting center. Other than that, they had Waddle, they had Tyreek, they had Mostert, they had Tua, they had Achane, they had Teron Armstead, they had Austin Jackson. They had their entire offensive line outside of Connor Williams. And I guess you can throw Isaiah Wynn in there. but they had pretty much a healthy offense, or at least their offense on the field, and they scored 6 points. 6 points. And their offense has been struggling to score points against legitimate opponents for weeks now. For weeks. I don't have the stat in front of me, but they've scored like 80 some odd points versus teams with an above 500 record this year. Whereas like 300 some odd points. This is the league's leading offense, right? Against teams with under 500 records. So like just an embarrassing performance from their offense, which is supposed to be the identity of their football team, was certainly fun to watch last night, and certainly made me feel a little bit better after arguing with people on the internet all afternoon. So let's get into the game here now, and let's start with the weather report for tomorrow, Monday, because weather's obviously going to be a factor in this football game. But in looking at the weather tomorrow, temperatures are going to be hovering around 20 degrees Fahrenheit, so it's going to be relatively cold. The real feel is going to be about 0 degrees Fahrenheit, so it's going to be a cold football game still, despite the fact that it was moved. The winds will be between 18 and 15 miles an hour, with some gusts of 25, 30 miles an hour. And all of the snow really stops pretty early in the morning, so everything should be clear, and you probably aren't going to get any snowfall during this football game. So this is playable but cold conditions in Orchard Park tomorrow.
Yeah, and I mean, we can kind of look at last night's game a bit as a comparable, presuming the snow is cleared from the field, right?
The Patriots wild card game, I think, would be another comparable here.
Yep, another comparable, probably temperature-wise more similar to that one, right? With the real field being around 0, but the field surface itself should be fine, right? And this is like the key in a game like this, where if the game was maybe being played during snow, that would probably have a bigger effect. Wind obviously still could be an issue with those gusts, but generally speaking, it should be a relatively normally played game, I would say. I would think even comparing maybe the kicking game last night to the kicking game tomorrow, maybe that's somewhat similar. Teams not going for longish kicks, right? Maybe you see a few more squib type kicks on kickoffs. We'll see. But I do think the kicking game, as far as field goals, probably becomes a little bit more condensed. But otherwise, for the offenses, right, I think it should be generally normal course of business, right, for this game.
And that's a great point too that you just made about the kicking game and how longer field goals might be off the table because of just how frozen the football is going to be. Sean McDermott traditionally is a coach who past the 50-yard line is going to go for it on fourth down. Mike Tomlin is typically a coach who past the 50-yard line on fourth down, if he can't kick a field goal, is going to punt it. So you have a very aggressive coach in Sean McDermott, one of the more aggressive coaches in the league, versus probably a Bill Belichickian conservative in Mike Tomlin. And that is going to be a matchup that could dictate the game. And obviously we're going to play the results in the end, but we could come to a situation where the Buffalo Bills get past the 50-yard line a couple of times and go for it, convert, go down and score some points. The Steelers punt it, and that's the difference in the game. Or we could get ourselves into a situation where the Buffalo Bills go for it a couple of times, don't pick it up, give the Steelers enough field position to score points. The Steelers pin us back a couple of times, and that's the difference in a Steelers win. So really, that matchup could be crazy. And obviously, you got to play the results once the results happen. But if Sean McDermott is uber aggressive and it works, could be really in the Buffalo Bills' favor. And if Mike Tomlin is conservative, it could be in the Bills' favor as well. But again, it could also backfire depending on what occurs over the course of the football game. Got to play the results. And we'll do that tomorrow night.
And I do think in this particular game, in this situation, I think you will see a less conservative Mike Tomlin in this game. Like the Steelers.
I don't know.
I'd be willing to bet in those situations in this game, Tomlin will go for it more than he does normally.
That would be a shift in the way that he thinks. He's a pretty conservative coach, but yeah, that's calling it now. We're going to clip that and we're going to play that later. First punt inside the 50. I'm going to clip it and post that on the internet.
I think if the Steelers are on the Bills side of the field with anything, I'll say 4 yards or less, I think they're going for it.
Yeah, that would be the smart move.
Yep.
Let's take a look now, since we just talked about the weather. Let's take a look now at the injuries for the Buffalo Bills, who had been relatively healthy heading into that Miami game. Gabe Davis is out. Taylor Rapp is out. So those are pretty significant injuries for the Buffalo Bills. Gabe Davis are one of our few boundary receivers and our best run blocker. He plays a majority of the snaps because he's the best in run blocking in a game where you could have to run the ball a lot. And then maybe this one isn't as serious because of the matchup, but Taylor Rapp, who has been a very good dime defender for the Buffalo Bills this year, is out as well. Questionable, and the extra day could help with this. Tyrell Dodson, who was limited, then DNP, and then limited with his shoulder injury. And then Rasul Douglas, who was DNP all 3 days with his lower leg injury. So those are the injuries for the Buffalo Bills. What are your thoughts? I think Dodson might play with the extra day. I still think Rasul Douglas is not.
I definitely think Dodson has more of a chance than Douglas. It was really interesting to me that Douglas had 3 DNPs but wasn't tagged as out for the game. That tells me that maybe he was kind of close, and maybe the Bills were playing it safer with him throughout the week. I also think that maybe the Bills are trying to maybe hold out to the last minute to decide what to do as far as if they're going to make any call-ups or that type of situation. But yeah, if I was a betting man and there was more of a chance for one or the other to play, I would say it would be Dodson. Now the Bills did sign AJ Klein in the practice squad, likely as insurance in case Dodson can't go. And we'll see what happens if Josh Norman or Ingram get called up, if Douglas cannot go. So some interesting roster gymnastics that may happen depending on whether these guys can go or not.
Yeah, so I got the list right here. Some call-up options, and this will be about 4 p.m. today, Sunday, that you will see these announced. Leonard Fournette is always an option, even though I think with all the other injuries, the Bills might not be able to call Leonard Fournette up for this game. They might have to go back to Latavius Murray, who they've sort of shied away from over the past couple of weeks. Someone mentioned in the comment section Andy Isabella with Gabriel Davis being out. I don't know if that is a sure thing. I think that with Deontay Hardy, you have that smaller, shiftier gadget type of guy. With Trent Sherfield stepping into the boundary number 2 role and is likely going to see significant snaps as a wide receiver, I think you're probably taking him off the field on special teams. He's a 4-phase special teamer. So you look at the Buffalo Bills practice squad, Brian Thompson and Tyrell Shavers could be making their first career, I don't want to say start, but could be playing in their first career games for the Buffalo Bills. And that could be the surprise call-up. He's either Thompson or Shavers. Shavers, our guy Merck, who scouted him pretty heavily throughout his college career, said he was the best gunner in the draft last year. And the Buffalo Bills have likely kept him as a guy that they see as a special teamer, like a Jake Kumaro type down the road at the back half of their roster. And then we mentioned it. I Googled all the guys the Buffalo Bills had in training camp, the guys that we loved, guys like Keyshawn Johnson, guys like Des Patman. All of them are free agents right now. And the Bills kept Brian Thompson out of Arizona State. And trust me, I've watched a lot of Arizona State football. There's nothing special about Brian Thompson on their practice squad over the past, over those guys. I think it's because he is a special teamer, and the Buffalo Bills were looking for that attribute out of Brian Thompson. So Thompson or Shavers could go and fill that Trent Sherfield role as Trent Sherfield moves up to fill that Gabriel Davis role. Don't be surprised if you see that. We mentioned we expect Tyrell Dodson to play, but if he doesn't, the Buffalo Bills could call up AJ Klein, who they just re-signed this week, as a depth option behind Balen Spector and Dorian Williams. And then again, Kaiir Elam is on the roster, but we've seen before Kaiir Elam, who's on the roster, get jumped by Josh Norman, and the Buffalo Bills also have Jamarcus Ingram as well. So the Bills have a ton of options. I would expect 2 of these these 6 names that I just mentioned to be called up. If you were a betting man, who would you call up? Actually, I shouldn't even say a betting. Who would you call up, and who do you think will get called up?
Ooh, man. I lean towards, because he can play special teams as well, I kind of think AJ Klein may get called up in this game. I think Dodson not being at 100%, the expectation that the Steelers will want to pound the rock a lot with Najee Harris and mix in Jalen Warren. I think they're going to try to keep the ball on the ground a lot. I think Klein would be somewhat valuable in that scenario. I know that they've got Dorian Williams, but again, to me, like thinking about a guy who could maybe serve two purposes, playing special teams and defense, I like Klein. And then I probably lean towards one of the receivers you mentioned. The only hesitation I have there is like the Bills may not mind being down a receiver on the active roster in a game like this.
4 is
but
pretty thin, though.
It's thin. I get it. It's thin. So that's why I say I lean towards Shavers or Thompson. Toss up for either one. I don't know which one it would be, but I would say Klein, and then one of those two guys I think would be the ones. I'd like to find a way for them to get Lenny up, but I just don't know. Like you said, if there's a path for that, given the other injuries.
Sterling Archer comes in and says Shavers has a breakout game and becomes the face of Razor advertising. I like that. Bills are electric. Same thing you said. He says, don't we need Fournette because of the weather? And that is the big question, right? The Buffalo Bills have seemed to be leaning away from Latavius Murray over the past couple of weeks. Don't quote me on this, but I'm pretty sure the Buffalo Bills can no longer cut Latavius Murray and sign Leonard Fournette to the active roster. I believe it's too late for them to make a transaction like that. So it has to be a practice squad call-up. So if you're the Buffalo Bills and you really don't trust Latavius Murray and you really want your power back to be Leonard Fournette, and let's also remember that Ty Johnson is back in this game as well. But if you really want Leonard Fournette, you hope Tyrell Dotson can go because then you don't need AJ Klein.
Right.
And you got to trust Kyer Elam as your emergency DB as opposed to a Josh Norman. So you are keeping Josh Norman and Jamarcus Ingram down. You're keeping AJ Klein down, despite the fact that you have an injured, dinged up Tyrell Dotson, and you're elevating Leonard Fournette. So if you're the Buffalo Bills, that's what you have to weigh, right? If Dane Jackson or Christian Benford go down, do I want Kyer Elam on the field? If Tyrell Johnson's shoulder doesn't hold up, and then Balon Spector comes in the game, and then Balon Spector gets hurt, do I trust Dorian Williams? Those are the questions you have to ask yourself, because that's what you have to think about, because that's what happens if you activate Leonard Fournette. So that's what the Buffalo Bills are weighing right now, and the Buffalo Bills have until 4 p.m. to weigh those decisions. Looking at the Steelers inactives, the big one, TJ Watt is out for the Pittsburgh Steelers. I was trying very hard this morning to figure out who exactly had what designation for the Steelers this week, because they just did not release an injury report yesterday. Like, they had a walkthrough, but didn't say who did and did not practice, at least not one that I could find. It wasn't on their official website. It wasn't on Twitter. So it appears they're getting back Minkah Fitzpatrick and Landon Roberts, and it appears nobody else is going to miss this football game. So outside of TJ Watt, the Steelers are relatively healthy, and they're also getting KZ back from his regular season suspension. So their safeties are back. Their middle linebacker is back. So the Steelers are getting pretty healthy outside of literally their best player for the stretch run here.
Yeah, and the Steelers defensively, and we're going to get into it here in a second, have been pretty solid this season. I know they've given up, from a points per game basis, they haven't been necessarily great, and they've been susceptible to the big play, but they've been pretty solid as far as like taking the ball away, and they still have a pretty good amount of talent on that defense. And in a game where like maybe having those safeties back kind of play towards, into the box a bit, like getting a guy like Minkah Fitzpatrick back for this game, it is quite important for the Steelers, I think. And so although obviously they're going to be without Watt, who is their biggest game wrecker, they still have Highsmith. They still have other guys like Marcus Golden who can get after the quarterback. So on top of that, plus getting some of these other safeties back and other guys, it's not a doom and gloom all over the board for the Steelers here.
All right. Before we get into the Buffalo Bills offense versus the Steelers defense, there was a comment here from Trey Ellis. He says, I'm Mr. Build a Dome. Why are some so against the obvious thing we need to do in Western New York? Trey, I'm on your side. I was Team Dome, but I will say this. Like, I made this comment on social media yesterday. My biggest question is why are they building the new stadium where they're building the new stadium? Like, I get it logistically, it makes sense. They have a world-class training facility right over there on Southwestern Boulevard. They have all their offices right there on Southwestern Boulevard. They already own the land where they're building the new stadium, etc. Like, so logistically, it makes sense. But in terms of weather, and I'm not saying what's happening today could have been prevented, but you're still building your stadium once again in the middle of a snow belt. Like, Orchard Park is one of the places that gets hit the hardest by snow, whereas places like the city of Buffalo, the North Towns, etc., do not. So I question the placement of the stadium more than the type of stadium they are building, but I get why they did that. And I will also say to be patient until the stadium is built, because I think once the stadium is built, the way it's been designed, where it's like 65% covered, you have heated grass. I think the way it is designed, despite the fact that it is open roof, I think you will not see the weather conditions affect the football game and the football stadium the way it affects Highmark Stadium, built into the ground, completely open air, no coverage at all. An outdated stadium built in the 70s before a lot of this new modern technology. So I do think that while I'm on your side, team build a dome, I do think the way that this new stadium will be constructed, and who knows, maybe I'm wrong, you'll see a heck of a lot of a difference in the game day experience and the on-field experience during weather conditions like this one.
Yeah, and I mean, even if you think about like how many times the Bills have actually played in like snow games where it's truly affected the play on the field over, like, let's say the last 10 years, there's been maybe like three or four that come to mind, right? The Colts game, the Colts game with Kelvin Benjamin, there's been a few, right?
The Bengals game last year in the playoffs.
But like, by and large, right? The issues around what this really means have been more about getting to and from the stadium than the actual in-stadium.
The games that have been moved to Detroit the last couple of years, like the one in the Rex Ryan era, one last year, that had nothing to do with the stadium construction, right? Like, and same with this. Like, this nothing about this game was about what was happening in the stadium. It was all about what was happening outside the scene. But I get, like, there are so many people out there who like the elements and like snow games and stuff. But to me, it's all fun and games until your team like loses in those conditions when they shouldn't. Like, so to me, like, I don't know, call me new school, call me whatever you want, because plenty of people like to call me names on social media. I prefer games where the weather is nice, or if there's a dome. Like, I particularly like that Browns Houston game. I'm glad it was played in Houston and not in Cleveland, right? Like, I'm glad it was more fun that way to me.
I agree with that.
I guess I'm young. I like offense more than defense. I'm the TikTok generation, right? I want those points on the board. But anyway, all right. So before we get to the Buffalo Bills offense versus the Pittsburgh Steelers defense, a quick word here from the guys over at the Cover One Buffalo podcast.
Many people ask us the best way to support us here at Cover One, and that is to sign up to become a Cover One Pass member. That contribution helps give us the access to all the data and information we use to create the content that you love.
And I think most importantly, brings you into our community of insiders. It's a great community based on Slack. I know a lot of people don't want to be on social media anymore or be in on those conversations. We bring all of it to you right in our great community of educated fans. And most importantly, you get access to our content creators.
Even better than that, everybody loves merch. You get awesome t-shirts, a cool decal, and a letter from the Cover One team signed directly to you.
All for $60. That gets you the entire season, next year's free agency and draft. $60. Click the link in the description. Cover One Insider. Become one today.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, now we are going to shift our attention, once I get down here and move the little banner on the bottom, to the Buffalo Bills offense versus the Pittsburgh Steelers defense. The Steelers have a pretty good foundation of their defense on paper. Their defensive line's got Larry Ogunjobi, a rookie that we loved coming out of this draft, and Keanu Benton at nose tackle. They got a veteran in Cam Hayward, who is, in my opinion, a future Hall of Famer, one of the best defensive linemen there is in the business. Rushing the passer, obviously they're without TJ Watt, but they have Alex Highsmith, who's very good, Marcus Golden, who is a veteran, and then Nick Herbig, who's a younger guy who is also pretty good at rushing the passer. At linebacker, they got Mykal Walker, and then they got a Landon Roberts back. And then the secondary, they got a promising rookie in Joey Porter Jr. On the other side, they're either going to have Levi Wallace or Patrick Peterson. Depends, with Peterson no longer having to play safety. Maybe he slides back into that CB2 role. Shannon Sullivan at nickel corner. And then at safety, they have KZ and Minka both back for this game. Looking at this roster on paper, it's the cornerbacks that I want to attack, and Joey Porter Jr. and either Levi Wallace or Patrick Peterson. And it's the linebackers, Mykal Walker, Landon Roberts, that I want to attack. So if I'm the Bills, I'm looking to get Diggs involved, trying to match him up with Levi Wallace if Levi Wallace is on the field, right? Kincaid matched up against some of these linebackers. I think that could be an advantage for the Buffalo Bills. And then James Cook out of the backfield, I think could be advantage Buffalo, because I don't think these linebackers get sideline to sideline quite like some other linebackers in the National Football League.
Yeah, and I mean, look, it's a theme now, right? For the last several weeks, it's Diggs, it's Kincaid, it's Cook. I also think when you start to look at some of the advanced metrics, the Steelers haven't been good at defending the slot this year either. So again, with Gabe Davis out, Khalil Shakir, his time to step up, and he has been. Another important game for him. Obviously, the Bills with Diggs and Kincaid, those are options 1 and 2 in the passing game. And then when it comes to option 3, I think it's been Shakir, right? I mean, Gabe Davis has had his moments, but like Shakir's kind of taken the mantle of consistency as that third option in the passing game from the receivers and tight ends group, right? So if you're looking at this game from the Bills standpoint, attacking the middle of the field makes sense against these linebackers, Kincaid, Shakir, Cook, right? Like, get into a situation where maybe you stress the middle with more than just one guy, right? And so that's like, I'm not saying obviously like the route combinations have to be good, but I think that you need to have a situation where the middle of the field, you have 1 or 2 or maybe even 3 options, depending on like the route concepts that you're honing in on. And then Diggs, like you said, against the outside corners, like that to me is where this game needs to funnel if you're the Buffalo Bills offense. And I do think that the Steelers, they don't have a ton of weaknesses on this defense, in my opinion. And so sixth in the league in points per game allowed. We mentioned the DVOA. They're pretty stout in everywhere except against wide receiver 3. So yeah, I think the big names for the Bills offense who have been the ones that kind of pull them out of this sort of post Ken Dorsey sort of stagnant offense, and the ones that have been doing it over the past several weeks, Kincaid, Cook, Shakir, in addition to Diggs, they need to be the ones that step up in this game.
You mentioned Shakir, and Shakir could be the X factor in this football game. The Steelers are 27th in DVOA against wide receiver number 3s. They're 8th versus wide receiver number 1s. They're 11th versus wide receiver number 2s. They're 6th versus tight ends, and they're 13th versus running backs. They're 7th overall against the pass. They're 9th overall against the run. They're 6th in overall defensive DVOA. So according to advanced metrics, outside of the slot receiver or the third receiver, very, very good football team. Very, very good defense. Again, this is without TJ Watt, though, but they've had guys shuffling in and out all season. Right? They've been playing Miles Jack at some point. They've been playing other guys as well, like Patrick Peterson's had to move to safety. Like they've had Eric Rowe had to step in off the street. So they've been really doing a patchwork job on that defense and still been very good. And that it goes to Mike Tomlin, that goes to Terrell Austin. They've done a really good job coaching up that unit this year. Looking at some of their tendencies, 27% stack box usage. That's second in the NFL. 51% use of one high shell. Buffalo Bills are used to seeing 2 high shell, trying to take the top off of that defense. No, they're 51% 1 high shell. They like to move that safety down. The middle of the field is covered by a safety 53% of the time, which is 5th in the National Football League. And they blitz 28% of the time, with this 10th in the NFL. So they like to get after you. They like to take away the middle of the field, and they like to force you to the boundary. That is what the Pittsburgh Steelers defense likes to do. They want to funnel you to the outside.
They do, and we saw this early in the game. The Bills struggled a little bit early in that Miami game with similar style against them there. And obviously the Bills did end up adjusting well, got Kincaid involved. Obviously the big play down the sideline to Diggs, like that's something that should be available for the Bills in this game should the Steelers continue on those trends, right? There's going to be opportunities down the field. Now, those types of opportunities haven't necessarily always been capitalized on by Josh Allen and his receivers this year. Obviously, we saw last week the big misplay to Diggs down the field, but he did drop one in down near the goal line last week. And there's going to be opportunity for that in Stephon Diggs in this game based on these Steeler tendencies. So if I'm the Bills, I would be expecting that. I would be expecting something similar to what we saw against the Miami Dolphins. From their stylistic approach last week and how much they kind of tried to pressure Josh Allen and kind of sat back with that cover zero behind it. So I'm expecting similar, right? And it's been a little bit of a hit or miss for the Bills against that style. And if you're the Steelers, like you're probably willing to kind of do with what has got you here. Stay on your trend, stay with what's comfortable for you, and just accept the results, right? And force the Bills to try to beat you that way. So I certainly wouldn't change my approach if I was Mike Tomlin in this game.
And these sort of like fall into some of Josh Allen's weaknesses too, right? Because one of the things you can do outside of like, first of all, he's not hitting on those deep balls. So those deep ball shots to the boundary might be a little bit harder in this game because Gabriel Davis is out, number one, and number two, because Josh Allen's been kind of struggling on hitting some of those boundary shots. So that one high safety look would theoretically leave the boundaries open for some deep shots, but we haven't been hitting and we're missing our number two receiver. And then on top of that, other things you can do is I would love to get the ball into Khalil Shakir's hands underneath, let him get some yards after the catch. I'd love to get the ball into James Cook's hand underneath, let him try to get some yards after the catch, match up against those linebackers, Walker and Roberts. Same with Dalton Kincaid. I know we don't love giving Dalton Kincaid underneath stuff, or Dawson Knox. I know we don't love giving our tight ends underneath stuff in terms of fans. They react to that negatively, that we're not throwing the ball down the field to them. But the Bills have a number of guys who you can get the ball into their hands to, whether it's Kincaid, Knox, Cook, Shakir, and they can make something happen after the catch. But it's not exactly Josh Allen's game, and it's not exactly Josh Allen's first read. So a lot of what the Steelers do on defense kind of plays into what we're not so great at right now, and that's a little bit concerning. And that leads us to the next talking point, and that's Josh Allen, right? We have Charles G coming in and saying Tomlin loves to show one look pre-snap and try to get the QBs to make mistakes, can't fall into that trap. Roy Collins says the Bills left at least 17 points on the field last week. Let's not do that again. Listen, those are two comments right there that are Josh Allen related comments, right? You can't have Josh Allen falling for Tomlin's tricks. You can't have Josh Allen turning the ball over and leaving points off of the field. And that's why, for me, in my notes here for Josh Allen, I said in these conditions against this team, you have to protect the football. And Josh Allen cannot turn the ball over more than one time in this football game.
The Steelers have the second best turnover differential in the league, plus 11. There's two teams that are better than them at plus 12, the Baltimore Ravens. And here's a fun fact. Tied for the NFL lead in turnover differential, the Baltimore Ravens are tied with another team. And I bet no one, without Googling it, will know within three guesses who it is, but it's the New York Giants who are plus 12 in turnover differential. But the Steelers plus 11 are right there, right? And so they don't turn the ball over on offense a ton. They're one of the fewest interception throwing teams in the league. The Bills are one of the most, right? And so the Steelers have really lived a lot on the takeaway as well this year. 6th best points per game allowed in combination with that turnover margin. In this defense, although they have given up yards, has been pretty good at taking the ball away and keeping teams from scoring points. So if you're the Bills, to your point from just a minute ago, like there needs to be a stress this week, I think, in the game planning and in the meetings to like take the easy throws in this game. Let guys like Knox and Cook and Kincaid work a little bit after the catch. If you have an easy throw where they're catching the ball on the run and where they catch it is only 3-4 yards past the line of scrimmage, but they can get another 3, 4, 5 after the catch. Like that's a win if you're the Bills in this game. Like you need to take those types of plays in this game. You need to put stress on the Steelers defense to frustrate them, right? And you need to convert on third downs, especially. And like to me, this starts, like you said, with Josh Allen protecting the football against a team who has been really good at taking the ball away this year. Take the easy throws in this game, please.
Yeah, I mean, Roy Collins comes in and says, "Give me a bunch of 8 to 10 play drives. Take what's there." That's what I have in my comments, because the next thing we're going to talk about here is the running game. To me, if you're the Buffalo Bills, your game plan is kind of like it was against Miami. I know it sounds weird, but you want to build an early lead. You want to go out there, you want to score first, right? And then you want to try to score second too. You want to try to get a 2-possession lead in this football game. If you're the Buffalo Bills, that should be the goal. Get a 2-possession lead. Because if you get a 2-possession lead in this football game, that forces the Pittsburgh Steelers to have to throw the ball more. And that forces them to have to rely a little bit more on Mason Rudolph, probably more than they want to. So if you're the Buffalo Bills, the goal should be to build an early lead and then to maintain that lead on the ground. And you don't want to go away from the run game for any long stretches. I feel like the Buffalo Bills against the Miami Dolphins kind of went away from the running game a little bit, got a little too Josh Allen centric. And again, there's nothing wrong with that, right? Because Josh Allen is such an absolute freakazoid, but it doesn't mean you have to do it. Just because you can do it doesn't mean you have to do it. Just because just because you can do it doesn't mean you have to do it. So if you're the Buffalo Bills, make sure there's a steady dose of the run game on every single drive. There shouldn't be any drives in this game where it's just completely lopsided pass heavy, unless for some gosh forsaken reason we're down in this football game, or it's the 2-minute drill towards the end of a half, right? Like those are the only times that you should go away from the running game. I'm not saying you have to run the ball first or ground and pound or all that stuff, but it just needs to be a part of your offense consistently on every single drive.
Yeah, it does. And like when you start to compare the raw statistics versus the advanced analytics, you see from a raw statistics standpoint, the Steelers are bottom half in the NFL in yards per game allowed against the run. But then you start to look into some of the advanced analytics and you look at DVOA, they're 9th against the run. PFF, as far as their premium stats against the run as a team, they're top 10. They're a barely top half team in tackling, which is fine, but they're a top 5 defense as well per PFF and 6th overall in DVOA defense. So even though it would look to be a tough matchup on the ground when it comes to kind of sticking with it, we have seen the Bills have success against good rush defenses in this stretch of the season, right? We saw them have success in sticking with it against the Eagles. We saw them have success in sticking with it against teams like the Dolphins, against teams like the Chiefs, right? So now a lot of that's Josh Allen being a part of that, and that's I think where maybe he becomes an X factor in this game, and right kind of becomes again maybe he becomes the complement to James Cook if a guy like Leonard Fournette isn't called up, and if a guy like Latavius Murray is kind of like not being asked to do much running the ball. Josh Allen's legs in this game. So I mean that's an X factor.
Yeah. So let's revisit this, because Walter S comes in and says, now that we're in the playoffs, I expect a heavier dose of Josh Allen runs. I agree to an extent. I don't think you want to rely on that, right? Even though if you have to, you have to. Bills Are Electric comes in and says, if we're going to run in sub 20 degree weather, Ty Johnson better be healthy, which he is. He cleared concussion protocol, or Lenny needs to be active. So my question to you is this. You're in charge, right? You get to make the decision. So I'm asking you what you are most comfortable with.
Yep.
Are you comfortable? What are you more comfortable with? Are you more comfortable with Cook, Johnson, Fournette, or are you more comfortable with Cook, Johnson, Murray?
I would say it's one and the same to me. I think because to me, when with Johnson back, it takes any real extra pressure off of Murray or Fournette. I really think, I mean, Johnson as the number 2 runner is obviously, I think, preferred at this stage over Fournette and Murray, right? I mean, Johnson has shown with his limited action that he can grind out yards. He will get those extra couple tough yards. So for me, who the 3rd running back is in that scenario is less important to me, which probably tells me that they're going to lean towards keeping Murray active for this game.
Yeah, I think it really all does depend on the health of Tyrell Dodson. I think if Tyrell Dodson cannot go, then I think you're forced to call up AJ Klein. I think if he can go, I think you might see Leonard Fournette called up. But again, we'll find out in a couple of hours here what the Buffalo Bills decide to do. And I love Leonard. I love Latavius Murray, right? Like I was the guy who at the beginning of free agency was pounding the table for Latavius Murray. And then once we signed Damon Harris, I was still pounding the table for Latavius Murray. I was a big Latavius Murray guy. As the season has gone on, and I don't even know if it's Latavius Murray's fault completely. I just think something's just not clicking between the style the Buffalo Bills play and the way Latavius Murray is running right now. He's had some runs this year that just really concern me. Just like it seems like he's just missing some cutback lanes and this and that and just getting stuffed. Like, is the blocking perfect every time Latavius Murray runs the ball? No. But is he missing some holes? I think so. And then also he's been also doomed to being the short yardage guy. He struggled in some of these short yard situations. That's hurt his yards per carry as well. But at the end of the day, I just think that I would definitely feel more comfortable with Leonard Fournette. But that's a tough decision the Buffalo Bills have to make when weighing, do we want Josh Norman? Do we want AJ Klein? Do we want another wide receiver from the practice squad, et cetera? So the Bills have quite a decision to make. And if they choose Leonard Fournette, that tells you just how little faith they have in Latavius Murray. So it'll be really interesting to see what decision the Buffalo Bills make today. Last notes I have here for the offense. The offensive line's focus has got to be Cam Hayward and Alex Highsmith. I think those are two very high caliber players for the Pittsburgh Steelers. And then Josh Allen, I think his focus needs to be on Minkah Fitzpatrick in this game. Minkah back is huge for them, roaming that secondary. He is an absolute playmaker. Who are you focusing on in terms of the Steelers defense?
It's Fitzpatrick for one, and Highsmith to me is the guy now that with TJ Watt out, to me, he should become a real focal point for the Bills protection, right? And you start to look at, okay, well, obviously there's no replacing TJ Watt's 19 sacks, but then you have Alex Highsmith sort of as the next guy on the team with 7 sacks, very promising player. He's been a really nice compliment to TJ Watt, obviously, but now he's going to be expected to be the number one guy as far as a pass rushing pop for the Steelers. So to me, it's Highsmith when it comes to the front 7, and then it's Fitzpatrick on the back end. So those would be the 2 guys that I would be keying on from a game planning perspective if I was the Bills.
Any final thoughts on the Bills offense versus the Steelers defense before we move on here to the Bills defense versus the Steelers offense?
Yeah, I mean, we talk about just one note here to talk about the Bills being aggressive on 4th downs. The Steelers, to their credit, are the 6th best team against defending 4th downs this year. They've only allowed 8 of 18 converted against them. So that, like you said at the top, right, the Bills and Sean McDermott being aggressive has been all year. The Steelers have been really good at the defending 4th down. So I do think actually one of the keys for this Bills offense will be how successful they are in converting 4th downs in this game. And I think that could go a long way to them really putting the foot on the throats of the Steelers.
All right, let's shift our focus now to the Buffalo Bills defense going up against the Pittsburgh Steelers offense. Looking at the Steelers offense just simply on paper, Mason Rudolph is their starting quarterback. They have Najee Harris and Jalen Warren in the backfield. Both of those guys have been playing very well lately. They have George Pickens, Deontay Johnson, Allen Robinson, and Calvin Austin, who will be their wide receivers. Pat Freiermuth, Darnell Washington, Hayward's brother, whose first name I'm blanking on right now, are their tight ends. And then you have Dan Moore, Cio Milo, Mason Cole,
Hayward,
James Daniel, Connor, thank you, James Daniel, and Jones, their first-round draft pick, left to right along the offensive line. The game plan, to me, is pretty simple, and that is to make the Pittsburgh Steelers one-dimensional, right? Like, you want the ball in Mason Rudolph's hands. You don't want the ball in Najee Harris's hands. You don't want the ball in Jalen Warren's hands. So, to me, the Buffalo Bills really do need to sell out to stop the run, especially in these conditions, with the one caveat being, in selling out for the run, you can't lose sight of George Pickens and Deontay Johnson, because the Steelers' offense, their passing offense, has been living off of big plays to Pickens and Johnson. Like, they've had putrid offensive passing performances outside of like 80-yard tutties to these guys the past couple of weeks.
Yeah, I mean, over the course of the season, they're 4th worst in the league in points per game, 17.9. I know in the last 3 games since Rudolph's taken over, they have 34, 37, and 17 points respectively. However, this has really been sort of the Steelers have really been playing, I'll call it like 2017 Bills football on offense, right? It's been
Mhm.
Mason Rudolph protecting the football, only 3 touchdowns, but no interceptions in these 3 games. And it's been really the continued emergence, I guess, of the Steelers relying on that running attack. Najee Harris, the last 2 games, over 100 yards
Mhm.
in the last 2 games. His only 100-yard games of the year have been in the last 2 games. And Najee Harris, last 3 games, 19 rushing attempts, 27 rushing attempts, 26 rushing attempts. He only had 19 rushing attempts in one other game, 19 or more rushing attempts in one other game this year, and that was way back in week 3. So they have really focused on sort of redoing the way
Mhm.
this offense funnels through the running game. And then obviously you mentioned Jalen Warren. He's 5th in the NFL in running back receptions. So that duo, that
Mhm.
tandem of Harris and Warren are maybe one of the best complementary backfields in the entire NFL. And the Steelers will
Yeah.
no doubt try to lean on that in this game. A top half of the NFL run
Mhm.
blocking unit per PFF. Najee Harris, as you mentioned, has been emerging lately. It is really important for the Bills to stop the run. And yes, the Steelers have lived off the big play, even though statistically they haven't been a good offense. They are
Mhm.
one of the better big play offenses in the league. That's how they've kind of lived.
Mhm.
So I will take my chances on low percentage, deep shots to George Pickens as long as the Bills are stopping the
Yeah.
run, right? The worst thing you can have happen is what the Cincinnati Bengals did to the Bills
Yeah.
last year, where it was just Joe Mixon run after run, gashing this team on the ground. You cannot let Najee Harris do that to you in this game.
And I feel like the game plan for Sean McDermott might be similar to the Patriots game plan when we played Bailey Zappi, right? Like try to, a lot of run blitzes, a lot of trying to shut down the running game, make them one-dimensional, a lot of trying to get into Mason Rudolph's head, get Mason Rudolph and get him into a mistake. But in that Patriots game, you saw the aggressiveness of the Bills defense. You got a couple of, dump offs to running backs, go for big plays to Zeke Elliott. That's a concern with Jalen Warren. And you saw a couple of big plays in the passing game and some plays that the Patriots missed, which is a concern with Deontay Johnson.
And the
And
Steelers have better weapons than the Patriots do, right? Johnson
Mhm.
and Pickens are far and away better than whatever the Patriots had to offer in that game.
Chris Jenke coming in saying, it sounds crazy to say this, but Dotson's availability and effectiveness is actually a huge part of this game. His ability to play downhill and stop the run is crucial in a game like this. And I 100% agree. And that's sort of the next talking point is looking at this Buffalo Bills defense on paper. If Tyrell Dodson cannot go, we both talked at the top of the show how we think the extra day of rest, he was LP, DNP, LP. The extra day of rest, I think we'll see Tyrell Dodson, which will help save you from having to call up AJ Klein. But if Tyrell Dodson can't go, expect Balon Spector to hop into the starting lineup. He played well against Miami, but very small sample size, right? You can't count on that being a thing again this week against the Pittsburgh Steelers. So who knows? Maybe AJ Klein gets the call up as a security blanket if Tyrell Dodson is dinged or cannot go at all. So we've already talked about that at length. Some other things that I want to talk about in terms of Buffalo Bills defensive roster. I think we have a decision to make on the defensive line. Looking at the inactive list, I think Kingsley Jonathan will be inactive, right?
Yep.
Alec Anderson will be inactive. There's one other inactive that you need in this football game. And last week it was, Linval Joseph, or the last couple of weeks have been Linval Joseph. Could we see this week the Buffalo Bills go with 4 edge rushers against the Pittsburgh Steelers? Leonard Floyd, Gregory Rousseau, AJ Epinesa, Shaq Lawson, and 5 defensive tackles. Could Linval Joseph jump Von Miller in this active roster, game day roster? Do you foresee that possibly happening?
I will say this: it's a good topic, and I have a group chat with a couple of my friends who are Bills fans, and I point blank said I want Linval up for this game. I would sit Von Miller. I mean,
Yep.
look, I think that's going to happen? I don't know, right? But in this type of game where you're expecting to get 20 to 25 carries out of Najee Harris and have to defend that all game, you're expecting, it would be different if I thought Von Miller was an asset in defending the screen game. I don't think he is. And like you talk about like what Jalen Warren can do to you in the screen game and getting to the edges. I don't think Von Miller is helping you there either, right? Von Miller is helping you on long third downs against, pass heavy teams, against teams that stylistically are not really what the Pittsburgh Steelers are. And while I do think like Von Miller could be disruptive against a guy like Mason Rudolph, I would trust the guys the Bills have in Floyd and Epinesa to get that job done. I want guys who are going to be plugging up the middle of the field. I want Linval Joseph up for this game, setting the tone to plug up the middle against Najee Harris. Najee Harris is a career 3.9 yards per carry back. He's been good lately, but we need to get him back towards that career average under 4 yards a carry. And to me, a bigger asset in this game would be Linval Joseph than Von Miller. If Von Miller's only going to play 15 snaps as it is, give me the 20-25 snaps that Linval Joseph is going to give you against the run over those 15 snaps that Von Miller's given. That's my opinion. I don't know if it's going to happen, but that's what I would do.
And that's what Pete Nana comes into. He says less than 50% chance McD does this in his opinion. And I agree. Like, I was shocked when the Buffalo Bills finally took a stand and sat Von Miller. And then it turned out it was just like a 1 week thing. And the very next week he was back. Maybe that was because it was against the Miami Dolphins, which you could find yourself in those third and long types of situations where you want to get at to a Tagovailoa. But Von Miller didn't even play a lot in that football game. He played very, very minimal snaps. So the common sense thing is sit Vaughn, play Linval. Will the Buffalo Bills have the stones to do it? That's the question. And we'll find out, tomorrow afternoon, whether or not they do in fact have the stones to do that. We talked at length already at the top of the show. We could possibly see Josh Norman over Kyer Elam. That is something you might want to brace yourself for. Wild card could be Jamarcus Ingram over Kyer Elam. One last Buffalo Bills defense roster construction thing I want to talk about here. And I don't know how much it's going to impact this game because, as you mentioned, right, matchups, the Steelers. How many third and long situations are they going to be in where the Buffalo Bills are going to have to go dime, right? But we've noticed this season, one of the big things, the big changes Sean McDermott's made, especially since Matt Milano has been out, has been Jordan Poyer up in the box, Taylor Rapp and Micah Hyde at safety in those dime packages. Taylor Rapp is out. Historically, when a safety has been gone this season, Cam Lewis has stepped into the role. Could we see, based on the matchup, the Pittsburgh Steelers and the weather, could we see Siran Neal over Cam Lewis as the extra dime defender in this football game? We've seen the Bills do it before historically, just not this season.
I'm not doing that if I'm the Bills. I think Cam Lewis, when he's played this year, has played pretty well. And I think he's brought an energy to that defense when he's gotten his chance to play. And I would stylistically, even in this game, I still think Pickens, Johnson, right, Allen Robinson, I think that's still a better matchup for Cam Lewis than it would be Siran Neal, even in a game where maybe the wind is a factor. I do think because there's not going to be necessarily snowfall during the game, because the field should be clear, I would give the nod to Cam Lewis. I love Siran Neal for what he does for this team, and he has improved defensively. But to me, I think Cam Lewis has earned the right to play that role.
Yeah, I would agree. And I think just switching up things so late in the season and making that kind of move, and I just think you're just asking for trouble when you do that. So I agree with you that I think that that Cam Lewis might be better. But Chris Ranke does say, and we've seen this before with Travis Kelce. The Bills have put Siran Neal on Travis Kelce before. So could the Buffalo Bills try to match up Siran Neal with Jeff Freiermuth?
Yeah, look, I get it. Freiermuth, he's missed games this year. He's played in 9 games. But here's the thing. He's got 308 yards on the year. 120 of those came in 1 game. So, right, you're talking about less than 200 yards over his other 8 games. If Pat Freiermuth is the guy beating you in this game, ideally, what that means is he's getting short passing plays. You've taken Deontay Johnson and George Pickens out of the game, and he's become maybe a third down target. In the pecking order of guys who are big threats in this game, I'm not trying to jinx it, but Pat Freiermuth, he's down the list, right? It's Johnson, it's Pickens, it's Warren, it's Harris. Freiermuth maybe is the 5th most important guy on this offense. And I know whether it's Poyer or Lewis or whoever, I still would trust those guys to be in coverage against Freiermuth.
Bill Switch comes in and says Cam Lewis should have knocked it down. And I'll tell you what, like, we need to let it go, right? We need to let it go. And I think if it wasn't for that Minnesota Vikings game, and if it wasn't for that one play where Cam Lewis didn't knock it down, more people would be having the conversation right now that Cam Lewis could be competing for a starting job on the Buffalo Bills in the Buffalo Bills secondary next year. I think Cam Lewis could be competing for the free safety job. I think
He could be.
I'm not saying it's going to be handed to Cam Lewis, but I can see a situation where when Micah Hyde moves on in this offseason, if Micah Hyde moves on, Cam Lewis is re-signed to a reasonable deal because he's also a free agent, right? And they bring in a rookie, and it's Cam Lewis versus the rookie for the starting free safety job. I think that's how good Cam Lewis has been in his limited snaps this year in the secondary. I think that Cam Lewis could legitimately be fighting for a starting role in this team next year, even if it is just in a stopgap capacity. And I think if it wasn't for that one play in Minnesota, I think more people would be on that bandwagon as well. All right. Steelers offensive tendencies since Matt Canada was fired. Mostly 11 personnel, 64%. The rest is 12 personnel and 13 personnel. They've been mixing it more since Matt Canada has left. 8th in motions, 9th in RPO, 8th in short dropbacks, 5th in design rollouts, and they are 3rd in the National Football League of running the football into a stacked box. So this is a team that very much 8th motions, 9th RPO, 8th in short dropbacks, 5th in design rollouts, 3rd in running into a step box. But this is an offense that very much knows that their quarterback is shit, and they're going to try to run the football and do things to make their life easier for the quarterback.
Yeah, I mean, the Steelers' goal here with this, right, is, I mean, and Najee has been running better, but like his vision was not great early in the year. It's gotten a little bit better recently, and he's been good he's been good with yards after contact as well recently. So that's something that Najee Harris brings to the table, his yards after first contact. The Steelers looking probably all day to just put themselves in like 3rd and 3s, 3rd and 2s, 3rd and 4s, right? Like that's going to be where they live probably in this game. And that could frustrate the Bills if they are able to convert on 3rd downs in those situations. But the Steelers aren't going to care running into these heavy boxes, right? They're going to say, Najee, go get us 3-4 yards on 1st and 2nd down in a lot of situations. And we're going to try to live to see another day when we get to 3rd and 3, 3rd and 4. And if you're the Steelers, that's not necessarily the worst game plan against this Bills team, because if you do convert some of those 3rd downs, all of a sudden you now have some longer drives, fewer possessions for the Bills, and it can be frustrating, right? And so while I don't know how many points that might translate to, it will potentially limit the amount of possessions and points that the Bills can put up. And I'm sure that's Mike Tomlin's thought, is keep our team in the game as long as possible, because you never know what can happen in the end.
Yeah, Walter S. comes in and says, Warren concerns me quite a bit more than Najee. The Bills have been fairly successful against bigger built running backs, I feel. The biggest concern for me, and that's sort of next on my note sheets here, is matchups to watch for the Buffalo Bills. And one of the matchups that I have is the Buffalo Bills linebackers versus Jaylen Warren out of the backfield. And you mentioned he's what, 5th in targets or 5th in reception?
5th in running back receptions in the entire NFL. Yeah.
Like that's concerning to me. So Terrell Bernard or Balon Spector or Jordan Porter, if he's down in the box, those matchups against Jaylen Warren out of the backfield and our ability to wrap up, our ability to tackle, you can throw Teron Johnson in there as well, and you can throw our cornerbacks in there as well if he gets to the edge, is going to be really important, because I think if the Steelers win, it'll be on the backs of like toxic differential plays. It won't be them gutting it down the field and executing and converting 3rd downs. To me, it'll be them popping off big plays to put them in scoring position. And I think Jaylen Warren plays a role in that. I think George Pickens plays a role in that as well. So to me, that's going to be a recipe for disaster, is if guys like Jaylen Warren, guys like George Pickens can pop big plays.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, Warren, 5.1 yards per carry this year. He's got the 61 receptions. He's 2nd on the team in receptions behind George Pickens. And I know Deontay Johnson missed a ton of time, and he's really their number 1 receiver. But I mean, Jaylen Warren is a force as a receiver out of the backfield. I mean, he's their number 2 running back. And if you start to think about like the fact that he's still 5th in the NFL in running back receptions, when you think about guys like McCaffrey and Kamara, Kyron Williams as being like number 1s and being sort of, those are the guys at the tops of the list. And now all of a sudden you have Jaylen Warren, who's pops his name up in that list. Now I know they've been kind of a 1A, 1B for most of the year, but they've really leaned into Najee a lot more as that ground and pound guy early downs. They've really used Warren pretty well in third downs. He's scary if he can get the ball in his hands with space, and he's been able to break off the big play for them this year.
Chris Jakey comes in and says, here's the question for you both. Where do the Bills run the defensive line match up with the best in terms of getting pressure and sacks on Rudolph? On the edges or up the middle? Do they need a blitz to get pressure? That's a great question. I think they will blitz because I think Sean McDermott's just been more aggressive this year. And like I said, I think you'll see some Patriots type of game planning. To me, I like Leonard Floyd versus Dan Moore Jr. That's a matchup that I like. But again, I think that might be limited by the fact that the Pittsburgh Steelers are going to try to get the ball out quick. They're going to design rollouts away from Leonard Floyd, etc. So I don't really expect a lot of sacks from the Buffalo Bills today. If they are going to apply pressure, to me, it's the A gap. To me, it's the A gap. And looking at Mason Cole is the guy I want to attack if I'm the Buffalo Bills. I'm lining up guys at zero tech, going man on man with Mason Cole. I am blitzing linebackers up the A gap. I'm trying to make Mason Cole's life miserable. I'm trying to collapse the pocket and force Mason Rudolph to roll out and get out of the pocket because I don't really think he can make a lot of plays out of structure. So I have linebackers like Terrell Bernard, and I have Ed Oliver versus Mason Cole as one of my matchups to watch for the Buffalo Bills because I think you have a distinct advantage there and you can collapse their passing game immensely by attacking right up the middle because I really don't think Mason Cole is very good.
And I agree with that. And I said I think the Bills have a clear advantage on the edge as well. I do think the Bills' defensive line overall, it has an edge over the Steelers' offensive line, right? It will where the Steelers can neutralize that, right, is with their run game. So to me, I agree with you. I love the idea of putting pressure on Mason Rudolph. I love the idea of making him make quick decisions, a la what we did to Bailey Zappi. Like, I just feel like I don't want to be in a situation where, like, you're giving Mason Rudolph a lot of time. Not that he's necessarily going to take advantage of it, but, like, the Steelers with big plays and Deontay Johnson, yards after catch, George Pickens down the field, like, I'd rather Mason Rudolph having to make those quick decisions than allowing him to kind of survey the field. So I'm with you on that. I think pressure is going to be important. And I love the idea, like you mentioned, of getting him out of the pocket and trying to force him to make off structure plays. Because I do not think that's an area where he would excel. And I think the Bills would have a strong advantage there.
True to Guns comes in with the super chat. I always appreciate you guys within your super chats too. So True to Guns, thank you. He says, I wanted to keep Singletary. I didn't mind the Buffalo Bills letting him go. I mean, James Cook was fourth in, rushing yards this year for all running backs. So clearly the Buffalo Bills wanted to put an emphasis on getting the ball into the hands of James Cook. And I'm happy for Devin Singletary getting his opportunity in Houston. I'm happy for Zach Moss getting their opportunity in Indianapolis. The Buffalo Bills, I think the biggest thing is like, I think Brandon Beane was a little bit vindicated in terms of, like, clearly Zach Moss is an NFL running back. Clearly Devin Singletary is an NFL running back. Clearly James Cook is an NFL running back. For some whatever reason, Zach Moss just never fit here. James Cook finally broke out, getting the volume that he probably deserved. And then Devin Singletary goes and with that injury to Pierce gets the volume that he deserves as well. And, he would have been great in a number 2 role, but how much would he have held back James Cook from being who James Cook has been this year? So, yeah, I mean, I'm with you. He's a good running back, but I think in a sense he was maybe holding back James Cook a little bit. So I'm not too disappointed there with Singletary. And then he says, keep Vaughn out till next year. And if no production, we cut him after next season. Not sure what the penalty is. Yeah, it's certainly easier to swallow after next year than it is after this offseason. And if you're the Buffalo Bills cap wise, you almost hope that, like, something clicks over the offseason. Von Miller gets right again, because he might have to replace that Leonard Floyd production, because we might not be able to afford a Leonard Floyd next season. Dave, your thoughts on Singletary and Von Miller?
Yeah, you can look at this one of two ways. You can look at it as, like, they were good draft picks in the sense that they are performing now on other teams. I mean, obviously Moss has taken the back seat back to Jonathan Taylor. Singletary's kind of taken the mantle from Dameon Pierce, who was kind of the belle of the ball last year as a rookie. People really loved Dameon Pierce last year. We're expecting some big things out of him this year, but Singletary wouldn't go away. I mean, it's kind of what happened with the Bills in a way, right? They drafted James Cook. Singletary didn't go away, and he still played a decent role last year. Now, again, James Cook's doing his thing this year. Could you make the argument that he could have taken the mantle and Singletary could have played maybe more of the, like what Ty Johnson's doing now. Yes, maybe, but like the Bills weren't going to pay for that, right? They weren't going to pay excessive dollars for that. So to me, it's like you take James Cook and Ty Johnson into this offseason, in my opinion, and then kind of figure out what you're going to do with that third running back spot. If Nyheim Hines comes back, we'll see from that injury. But the Bills, I think kind of have a good situation now with where they are. So I'm not too bent out of shape about it.
And we got Bills, which was really he was going through it in the comment sections here. He says, I'll tell you what you need to do is put some respect on Teron Johnson's name. Second team All-Pro. So kudos to Teron Johnson. He's gonna be a big part of this game as the Buffalo Bills always stay in nickel. Then he followed up with Teron Johnson. Respect. I'm so pissed I'm making typos. Then
pissed about what though?
I don't know. Us not mentioning Teron Johnson, and then peace out, go Bills. So
I mean, I was
all of the emotions there from Bill.
I was pretty respectful of Teron Johnson. Someone asked on Twitter who's the unsung player of the team, and I said Teron Johnson. So I'm not really sure where that's coming from, but hey.
All right. So last matchup that I have to watch for the Buffalo Bills. Obviously, we mentioned we got to shut down the running game, right? We got to shut down the running game, but at what cost? Because my third thing to watch here is if the safeties have to step up in order to help in the running game because our front seven can't do it, then I think it opens up some big plays down the field for the likes of George Pickens and Deontay Johnson. So if you're the Buffalo Bills, your focus needs to be on stopping the run, but you got to do it without having to bring those safeties up.
Yeah, and if you kind of think about it, right, there's some parallels to this Steelers receiving group to the Bills, right? You have your Deontay Johnson, who's I think the parallel to Stephon Diggs from a skill position standpoint. And now Gabe Davis is not in this game, but George Pickens, I think to me is their sort of version of Gabe Davis, but with maybe one of the best, like what was the attribute in Madden? Do they still have it? Like the spectacular catch rating with like that George Pickens has. Like he can make some really insane plays. And like if he makes a big play like that, it could be frustrating, right, for this Bills defense and for us fans watching the game. So that's one thing where you just like you said it. We've said it throughout the entire show. Like you've got to limit the big plays down the field to George Pickens. I can live with some underneath stuff to Deontay Johnson. That's going to happen, but like you cannot give up a cheap one to this team, right? Deontay Johnson had the big play that kind of broke the game open for the Steelers against the Ravens last weekend. Pickens has made the big plays, but he's been also had games where he's done nothing, right? He's kind of been like their Gabriel Davis. So to me, this has to be a game where if you're the Bills defense, like it has to be one of those where it's like the George Pickens does nothing game, right? Like that's me. If that's the case, then I think the Bills have done a really good job and will have a really good chance to win.
Looking at some other statistics, special teams, the Steelers are 20th in DVOA, and special teams we are 15th. They obviously have Chris Boswell, who's got some experience kicking in the elements. Harvin is their punter. He's got some experience kicking in the elements. He's always very hit or miss. And they have Calvin Austin returning punts for them. So whether it's special teams or whether it is defense, any final thoughts before we move on to our pregame superlatives?
No, I mean, Boswell's had a quietly really good year, right? He's 29 for 31 on the year in field goals. But again, the kicking game, to me, it's going to be interesting to see how wind maybe affects the decision-making in this one. So special teams, I think about even, I would say.
All right. Before we get to our pregame superlatives, this show is brought to you by Picasso's Pizza. 4 great locations in Williamsville, West Seneca, Lancaster, and Blaisdell. Buffalo Pizza since 1980. You can order online at picassospizza.net. And if you're an out-of-towner like us, you can even get it mailed to your home. And I can tell you from experience, it is just as good as getting it fresh from the restaurant. Again, that is picassospizza.net. All right, on to our pregame superlatives. Let's start with our take me higher player of the game. And this is a player for the Buffalo Bills that needs to really step up their game outside of Josh Allen for the Buffalo Bills to have success. So, Dave, I will start with you. Who is your take me higher player of the game?
I'm elevating this guy to take me higher status after the last couple of games. Maybe it's a bit premature, but I don't think he's wild card anymore. I think he's past that. To me, take me higher. I'm going Khalil Shakir in this game. I feel like analytically, this is a matchup the Bills should be able to take advantage of. I think Dalton Kincaid around the middle of the field can take some attention away from Shakir. Gabe Davis, obviously not going to be playing in this game. Shakir has been the guy to step up offensively for this team.
Mm-hmm.
I think really important for a guy like Khalil Shakir to be somewhat of a chain mover, right, in this game and be able to work after the catch. There's a lot of ways you can go with this on defense, obviously, but like, I think this is what I'm doing. I'm breaking the seal and elevating Khalil Shakir into take me higher territory for this game, and let's make it happen. Khalil Shakir, big game. Let's do it.
Yeah, spin comes in, says Daquan Jones stuffing the run is big. I'm making a little bit of a leap here for my take me higher player of the game as well. I'm going with the Buffalo Bills interior offensive line, Connor McGovern, Mitch Morse, and Osiris Torrance. I think that they need to keep a clean pocket for Josh Allen to make some of these throws that he needs to make to the boundaries, because the Steelers focus so much on covering the middle of the field. And I think that the Buffalo Bills the interior of this offensive line needs to generate push in the run game to help the Buffalo Bills sustain drives against the Pittsburgh Steelers. They can't be dependent on outside runs. Cam Hayward can't be putting guys on skates, right? It could be a long day if one of those two things or both of those things happen. So I could go with the entire O-line, but I'm just going to go with the interior of the offensive line. Yes, I am cheating a little bit. So I'm going to go McGovern, Morse, and Torrance here. They really got to step it up if the Buffalo Bills are going to be successful. On to our wild card player of the game. This is a surprise player who steps up that helps lead the Buffalo Bills to victory. Dave, who is your wild card player of the game?
Yeah, wild card. I'm going Dane Jackson here. I think Douglas will be out for this game. Seems like all signs are pointing to that. He's clearly not 100%. Wild card in the spirit of being a guy that maybe isn't sort of a regular name we talk about, right? And Dane Jackson kind of being that third guy, now the first guy off the bench, kind of playing opposite of Christian Benford. It'll be interesting to see if Dane Jackson gets a lot of his snaps against a guy like Deontay Johnson, and Benford is kind of playing against more against a guy like Pickens. It'll be interesting to see how many snaps, based on how the Bills line up and how the Steelers line up, go against each of these corners. But I think Dane Jackson really needs to have a big game, tackling, playing against these receivers, stepping up when the Steelers do take their shots down the field, because inevitably they probably will. And I thought Dane Jackson really improved over the course of that, even within just that game against Miami last week, coming in cold, little shaky to start, but ended up coming up with some big moments. So to me, I'm going Dane Jackson, wild card player.
I'm cheating for my wild card player of the game, and I'm actually not going with the Buffalo Bills player at all. My wild card player of the game is Mason Rudolph, because I truly think that this is the biggest wild card in this football game, right? If he shows up and he plays steady and he completes passes down the field and makes some big plays, the Steelers have a shot at winning this football game. If Mason Rudolph cannot complete passes down the field, if he turns the ball over, if the Steelers are very much one-dimensional, they have no shot at winning this football game. So to me, again, I'm cheating a little bit. I'm going with Mason Rudolph, because if Mason Rudolph shows up and plays well, Steelers got a shot. If he doesn't, I really don't think they have much of a shot at winning this football game. So I'm going to go with Mason Rudolph as my wild card player of the game. And that leads us now to our Respect You player of the game, which is when you would typically mention a Pittsburgh Steelers player that you need to keep your eye on, because these are the players that really are going to step up for the Pittsburgh Steelers and help them be successful. Who are the Pittsburgh Steelers that you got your eyes on this game?
Yeah, actually, there's quite a few options here for the Steelers. And while it would be kind of easy to go with a guy like Pickens or Najee Harris, like, you definitely got to watch out for those guys. I'm going to go with Alex Highsmith. I think that with with TJ Watt out, Highsmith becomes their premier pass rusher in this game. If you can kind of neutralize Highsmith, avoid negative plays on offense in a game where you would hope to be as stress-free as you can for a playoff game, letting a guy like Alex Highsmith wreck the game for
Mm-hmm.
you could be bad news for the Bills. So I'm going to say, out of all the guys, I like the guy stepping in for TJ Watt as someone to really continue to keep your eye on. Alex Highsmith for me.
Yeah, Charles G comes in and says Minka Fitzpatrick. Chris Janke comes in and says Cam Hayward. I think that those are certainly the three players on defense. Hayward on the defensive line, Highsmith from the linebacker position, and Minka Fitzpatrick in the secondary that you as a Buffalo Bills team need to really concern about. I think those are the three best players on that Steelers defense minus TJ Watt. So Hayward, Highsmith, Minka, those are the guys that you want to pay attention to. Since you went defense and people in the comment section went defense, I'm going to go offense here. Could go Najee Harris, right? I'm not really that concerned about Najee Harris, to be honest with you. You mentioned he's been on a heater lately, but career 3.9 yards per carry runner. George Pickens is always a big play threat. I'm going to go with Jaylen Warren because it just always seems like players like Jaylen Warren are the thing that breaks the back of the Buffalo Bills. So I'm going to go with Jaylen Warren here. Out of the backfield, you got to be aware of him as a running back. He's a bowling ball running back. I think he's got more big play potential than Najee Harris. I think, again, I mentioned at the top of the show, toxic differential is going to be what the Steelers need to focus on. Who can get them? I don't think they're going to march the ball down the field, right? Mason Rudolph is not Tom Brady. They're not going to be executing very well on third downs, in my opinion. Their best shot is breaking off big plays. And big plays come from, in my opinion, one of two guys. It's going to be Jaylen Warren. It's going to be George Pickens. Maybe Deontay Johnson busts a big one. But so to me, Jaylen Warren has to be that guy that you got to respect, especially out of the backfield, especially with a guy like Tyrell Dodson out, whether it's Balen Spector, whether it's Terrell Bernard, whether it's Teron Johnson, whether it's Jordan Poyer. You got to wrap up. You got to make sure that Jaylen Warren doesn't get any of those yards after the catch. All right, on to our fire sale. It's our hottest take of the football game. Dave, I'll start with you. What is your hottest take of the football game?
Yeah, look, I think he was my take me higher player, and I'm going to kind of continue that trend. 100+ yards and a touchdown for Khalil Shakir in this game. I think out of the slot, he's going to be getting peppered, as we like to say, with targets in this game. I think him and Kincaid will really work the middle. I think Diggs will obviously do his thing, but I'm going to go Khalil Shakir, 100+ and a touchdown, putting him 2 straight games with 100+ yards because he had 100+ against the Dolphins. So I'm going to say Khalil Shakir, 100+ yards and a touchdown in this game. I think he has one of the best matchups of the Bills' offensive skill position players.
And it's really crazy too, because this year Shakir, he has not had a lot of volume, but he has just been so efficient with his targets. And which was funny because we were mad at him early in the season because he was targeted once and had that drop, and we were like, dude, you're not getting a lot of targets. If you're dropping these, you're not going to get on the field. And then he has taken advantage of his targets since. It's almost video game esque, right? Where he's like that third option in your Madden team where whenever you throw him the ball, he's effective, but like you hardly ever throw him the ball. Like that's what Khalil Shakir has been this year. So it'll be interesting to see if those statistics carry over to an increased volume, because I expect to see an increase in volume and targets for a guy like Khalil Shakir this week with Gabriel Davis out, and hopefully it does. This is a game where I struggle for a hot take. I really like these weather games, Pittsburgh Steelers, teams that don't make mistakes. Like I was struggling for a hot take. So instead of one big hot take, I have like 2 spicy takes. Number 1, Josh Allen, 0 turnovers. I don't think he turns the ball over.
I don't know. That's a pretty hot take.
I guess it's a hot take, right? And then my second hot take of the game is Brian Thompson or Tyrell Shavers will be active at wide receiver for the Buffalo Bills. I don't think they'll do anything other than play special teams, but I think that one of them will be active, and people will be shocked when they see that come across the news wire this afternoon. All right, time to go back to we got Fluffy Panda coming with a hot take. Says Josh Allen, 0 turnovers, Buffalo defense 3+ turnovers, Bills play a complete game, won by 26+. Okay, well, there we go. That leads perfectly into our final thing here, and that is game predictions. Take us back to the future, Dave. Paint a picture for us. What does this game look like tomorrow afternoon?
I think even undermanned on defense, as far as with the injuries, I think the Bills come out and you see a game plan very similar to what you saw against the New England Patriots a few weeks ago. Really aggressive style defense. really forcing the issue with Mason Rudolph, presuming they can do well on early downs, which they did pretty well on early downs against Zeke Elliott in that game. If they can kind of do well on early downs against Najee, which I hope they can do, adding that extra defensive lineman, interior defensive lineman, which I hope they do, and obviously the crowd behind them as well. The Bills defense, I think, still sets the tone in this game, more so for the offense, who I think maybe, again, takes a little bit for them to find their footing, but eventually they get it going. Commit to the run game. James Cook, 15-plus carries in this one. Josh might have a turnover, might not, but I do think ultimately he has a pretty good game and notably contributes a lot with his legs, 10-plus carries, I think, for Josh in this game. And the Bills do end up winning, and I don't know how comfortable it's going to be. I still think the score will be relatively close, but I do think the Bills end up coming out and winning by more than a touchdown in this game. So final prediction for me, Bills 27, Steelers 20. No, Steelers 19. I got to make it more than a touchdown. Steelers 18. Make it a weird score.
Score. That could also be a scoregami there.
Yeah.
I'm going to go Bills 23, Steelers 13. So I'm going to go with the 10-point differential in the score here. I just think the defense gets the job done. Like, I think they go out there and they shut down the running game of the Pittsburgh Steelers. I think they make the Pittsburgh Steelers one-dimensional, and I just don't think Mason Rudolph can handle that. So I think as the Steelers are struggling for points all day, I think the Bills eke out 2 touchdowns and 3 field goals in the wintry weather conditions in Orchard Park. So I think it's closer than people think because of those conditions and how the offense might struggle with those conditions a little bit. But I think it'll be a slightly lesser version of what you saw last night in Chiefs Fins, where the Buffalo Bills just clearly throughout the 4 quarters of football look like the better team. But I do think conditions will keep it a little closer than Chiefs Fins, because the Steelers do have a team better equipped to play in those conditions than the Miami Dolphins. Roy Collins comes in and says 27 Bills. Carolina Frank says 24-10 Bills. Mr. Migo says 24-17 Bills. Page says 24-17 Bills win. All right, Dave, to close out the show here this afternoon, I have a fun little over-under for you to finish this show out. Over under 3 times that from 15 minutes before kickoff to the end of the game, it is mentioned that Sean McDermott, Joe Brady, and Mike Tomlin all played at William & Mary University.
Over, easily.
Over? You're going to go over 3?
I'll collect my money, yeah.
So for those of you who don't know, Sean McDermott and Mike Tomlin were teammates at William & Mary. And Joe Brady was also a wide receiver at the University of William & Mary. So it might not even be a university. It could just be a college. But William & Mary, all 3 of those guys played there at one point. It will be mentioned on the broadcast. And here's another thing. I'm going to get this one off my chest. So I need to get this off my chest because every network is doing this now. Those stupid graphics that they do when they're trying to show statistics like Josh Allen in a barrel going over Niagara Falls and all those dumb things that all these networks do.
Like the electric football thing last night.
Yeah, like, stupid. Dude, they're just keeping these like graphic artists and these like digital artists like employed. Is that what they're trying to do at this point? Because I just don't. William & Mary College, thank you. I'm dumb. But I would love it if one network was just like, we're going to stop being stupid and just show a football game. Like, we're going to stop being dumb. We're just going to show a football game. I will kudos to whatever network decides to do that first, because these graphic things are so dumb. And there's going to be some William & Mary dumb graphic at some point in this football game.
Yeah. I mean, like, and last night's was like, you have all this money apparently to put in.
They're not even good animations. They're not
and
even
all they did was take photos and like freeze them and then just like underlay that with like terrible like shaking. It was just like last night's was one of the worst, I think.
Yeah. And then Peacock's commercial-free fourth quarter. Give me a break. There was nothing commercial-free about that fourth quarter. It was just one giant Peacock commercial. Anyway, we haven't really talked about this, so let's just talk about it live on air. People can probably still catch us tomorrow night at 9 p.m., right? Like Greg and Aaron might be done. We're going to do a post-game show.
We gotta talk with the bosses, but I think right, if the game like let's say so it's 4:30, if the game ends around 7:30, let's say like I don't know. It's going to be tight, right? If the guys go on, let's say
Mhm.
at 8 or 7:45, probably more closer to 8, I would imagine. Then
Mhm.
I don't know, right? Because we usually start at 9, so
Yeah.
I don't know. We'll have to figure that out.
So yeah, you might get a post game show. You might not. We will let you know on the socials, and we'll talk it out with Greg and Aaron. And if there is a post game show tomorrow, Greg and Aaron will probably let you guys know as well. So you might see us tomorrow. You might not. If not, don't forget Cover One post game show live following every game with Greg and Aaron, as we just mentioned. And David Fox always has his post game report on cover1.football immediately following the game as well. I'm going to put my phone away during the game tomorrow. I'm not going to tweet during the game tomorrow. I've made that decision. I made it.
Are you going to stick to it, though, is the question.
I'm going to stick to it. I'm going to put my phone in one of those like Faraday pouches or whatever, I think is what I'm going to do.
Nice.
Well, did you see my massive old takes exposed last week? Did you see it?
No.
It's really a good thing at this point that no one associates our Bills guys account with you, because I would feel bad if they did. After Josh Allen's fumble, I tweeted Josh Allen is going to cost the Buffalo Bills the AFC.
Oh, yeah, I did see that. But you did own it though after that, right? You came back and you were like, I'm dumb. I mean, you owned it, right? The one thing you can count on is if you have a freezing cold take, you will own it. You will own it.
Yeah. Oh, I own my freezing cold takes. A badge of honor. I have so many. And here's the thing now, like what I've realized is we have so many followers on social media now that like I have to think before I speak. I can't just say stupid shit anymore. Like I have to think before I speak. I can't just tweet out dumb stuff anymore, because when I do, like people actually read it. I'm not used to people reading my stupid shit. So thank you guys for following us on social media. But oh yeah, over under how many times I tweet during the game. That might be a good one. Yeah. Anyway, thank you guys so much. Prepare yourself for a Bills-less Sunday, right? If you're in Buffalo, stay safe, stay indoors. We will see you guys maybe tomorrow. Tim Anderson loves how unhinged I am, right? So I think a lot of people appreciate how unhinged I am. I was having fun with the Dolphins last night on social media, but that was fun. But we will maybe see you tomorrow. And if not, until next time, go Bills.
Go Bills.
Thank you for watching tonight's episode of the Air Raid Hour. Make sure to hit that like button on the way out. If you are catching the show on demand, leave a reply in the comment section and we will respond over the course of the week. You can always listen to every episode next day on all major podcasting platforms, including Apple Podcasts and Spotify, by searching Air Raid Buffalo. Thank you for your continued support, and as always, go Bills!